rockets towards the Israeli settlements on retaliation to what is happening inside the Gaza Strip. And from time to time, we can hear even the sound of the rockets firing from the Gaza Strip towards the adjacent settlement of Israel.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That is Tariq Abu Azoum for us inside Gaza.
Thank you.
Well, Marwan Jalani, Director General of Palestine Red Crescent Society, joins us now from Ramallah. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us here on Al Jazeera. Now, I understand, first of all, a number of your people were killed today. Can you explain exactly what happened, where they were and how they were killed?
Yes, thank you. These are the darkest days for the medical teams and specifically for Palestine Red Crescent emergency medical volunteers and staff. Today, we lost 4 of our colleagues. 3 of them got a direct hit while they were attending to some of the injured in the Jabalia area. The fourth person went to attend to a number of people who were injured and who needed medical attention. And we had, in this case, we had coordinated this mission with the International Committee of the Red Cross. We were given the green light to go ahead to that area because it was on the border area in the east of Gaza. While they were attending and they were putting one dead body in dead bags, one of our medics was shot straight in the back and through the heart. And obviously we lost the 4th person in less than half an hour. This is a very, very tragic situation. Our people are stressed out. They are exhausted, and we have never seen such atrocities. We've never seen such a deliberate targeting in this manner of medical missions who are fulfilling a humanitarian assistance to the people who need it.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Do you believe it is deliberate targeting? Because I imagine that your people are wearing, very obvious medical Red Crescent Society paraphernalia that it makes them easily identifiable as medical workers.
True. Our cars are clearly the signs, the emblem that is protected under international law is visible from land and air. We have numbers on top of the cars, the ambulances and PRCS cars, who are communicated to the Israeli authorities. There is no way to mistaken the teams, the medical teams, with their protective emblem, their vests, their uniform, our cars, obviously, and confuse them with anything else. But this is not an isolated incident. We have reported since the beginning of this crisis in the last 5 days, more than 30 violations, not only in Gaza, but also on the West Bank, including live bullet fired at our ambulances. We face harassment, we face intimidation, our teams are beaten up, the guns are pointed to the faces of our medical teams at checkpoints. There are so many violations against those paramedics. In every mission, they try to go and help those people, the sick and the wounded, and these are deliberate. And we have communicated this to all international organizations. We have complained. We have raised the issue of the protection of our teams and the necessity for the conflicting parties to respect international law and respect the mission of our medical teams.
Now, we know first responders are the first to run into the face of danger, but does this make you rethink or make your teams rethink doing that in this scenario when you do feel like you are being deliberately targeted?
Believe me, after the killing of those 4 people, this was the worst moment in the entire history of our society. In the entire history of this long conflict, our people were devastated. They were crying. They were hugging each other. And they didn't know what to do except to wipe their tears and go out again and face those atrocities, this danger, this total ignorance of or ignoring of the international law and of the medical missions. We have raised this issue with all international organizations. The problem today is Israel and the Israeli authorities are not listening to not only not listening to anybody, there is no mechanism at all to coordinate medical missions. So they shut off all the international organizations, including International Committee of the Red Cross, including the United Nations. When we ask them, how can we coordinate so that our teams are protected? How can we coordinate so we can reach to areas where there are so many dead bodies in the street? And they say the Israelis are not responding at all. And this is quite tragic. And these are considered war crimes to target medical teams, to target civilians, and to leave them under the rubble and to leave the injured without any possibility of access to them.
Marwan, we really do appreciate your time and explaining the situation as it is for you and your people working in quite remarkable circumstances. That is Marwan Jalani, Director General of the Palestine Red Crescent Society. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reached a deal with the leader of the opposition to form an emergency wartime unity government. Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdel Hamid is in West Jerusalem and joins us now. Now, Hoda, can you just explain a little bit more about this war cabinet that was set up earlier today and what power, what control it will have over Israel's military?
Well, the agreement that was reached between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, who's the leader of the National Unity Opposition Party, is to form what is called an emergency unity government. Now, within that emergency unity government, there are 2 different forums or committees. There's what could be referred to as the war cabinet, and that is a restricted committee. It is Prime Minister Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, the opposition leader, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and then you have 2 more people who are Danny Eisenkot and a former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. who are also sitting on that committee, but as observers. Now, I think why the formation of that gives Prime Minister Netanyahu 3 people who actually have extensive military knowledge, because whether it's Benny Gantz or Danny Eisenkot, both of them were former chiefs of staff, and Benny Gantz as well was defense minister. They will be in charge of the war, all the important decisions of the war, the everyday planning of the war. You have then a larger forum, which is called the Political Security Cabinet, which includes all the members of the ruling coalition, the defense and intelligence establishment, added to that Benny Gantz and some members of his National Unity Party. So you have these two together. It has several benefits that Benjamin Netanyahu has his coalition government, but very few members of that government have actually military experience. So he stands all to gain from bringing on board the opposition leader and picking his brain, basically, on what to do next. It also gives the Israeli public the idea that at the moment, these politicians who are usually at odds, remember this country had 5 elections in a span of 4 years only, just a week, just days before this war started, that they were still having bitter fights. There were weekly demonstrations against the Prime Minister Netanyahu and his ruling coalition. Well, at the moment, the idea is all this has gone. We stand united in this time of crisis. Something many Israelis would tell you they wanted to see, because at the moment we are in this phase 2, the clearing of the bodies, the death toll of what happened on the first day of the attack is now kind of over. The next phase is being prepared, and many think that would be a ground invasion.
OK, thank you so much. That is Hoda Abdelhamid for us in West Jerusalem. A rocket fired from Gaza has hit a hospital in the southern Israeli city of Ashkelon. No casualties have been reported. Hamas has launched a barrage of rockets targeting Ashkelon. Most of them were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defence system, but there are reports of damage to some buildings in the city. Well, for more on this, Mohammed Shemjoun is in Ashdod, southern Israel. And Mohammed, what's the latest you're hearing about these security incidents in the area in the south there?
Tom, let me walk you through the various security alerts we've been hearing about the last half an hour to an hour. You have had rocket sirens going off in several different towns and cities and communities in southern Israel bordering the Gaza Strip. Among them are Nir Am, where we also learned from the Israeli army that there had been an incident, an exchange of fire between Hamas fighters and Israeli army members. The Israeli army says that there were 3 Hamas fighters in a vehicle and that an Israeli army tank fired upon them, and that threat has been thwarted. We're trying to get more information about that. We'll get those details to you as we have them. Another area where there have been sirens heard is Sderot, and another one is the city of Ashkelon, which you mentioned in your intro to me. Of course, there had been those rocket strikes that hit Ashkelon, which is about 10 to 15 kilometers south of where we are here in Ashdod. So a lot of tension in that area. Of course, a lot of people very concerned about the fact that there have been more reported incursions in various areas in the south today by Hamas fighters. We've heard about fighting going on between Israeli army members and Hamas fighters in places like Zikim, which is about 3 to 4 kilometers north of the Gaza Strip. So a lot of tension still at this hour about if there are more incursions or if there are the threat of incursions by Hamas fighters in these areas. So right now, even though where we are here in Ashdod, where we did hear rocket sirens earlier in the day, the tension has lessened here, but further on south, much higher tension at this hour, and a lot of security incidents going on as we have been informed by the Israeli army thus far.
With so much going on, how are people reacting to it there?
Tom, I can tell you that everybody that I've spoken with the past couple of days in these areas in the south, they are still dealing with a huge sense of shock, many of them telling me that they have not yet fully really been able to process the enormity of what has happened, what has transpired over the course of these last several days since Saturday. One of the things that seems to be helping the people that we're talking to here is the fact that they are seeing more and more members of the Israeli army being mobilized guys to the south. You could be anywhere in these areas and you see what a mass mobilization is going on. You see army members, you see reservists, you see police in all of these areas. You see them being transported. You're seeing them driving themselves by car to join up with their units. So there is this sort of rally around the flag effect that's going on. And so even the people that we're speaking with that are still shocked and concerned about what's going on, they are coming out a lot of the time and showing their support for the troops that they are seeing, whether it's by offering them water or food, or even sometimes blaring music. I mean, there have been surreal scenes that we've come across at times of really heightened tensions the past couple of days, where you will see cars full of settlers coming to intersections where there are members of the Israeli army and members of the reservists, and they will blast their speakers and get up on the roofs of cars and dance. It's a very jarring thing to see at a time of such high tension and uncertainty. Everybody we've spoken with say they do believe that an invasion, a land invasion of Gaza will be happening at some point soon. They don't know exactly when. Of course, the Israeli army has not announced that, but the people we're speaking with do believe that that is going to happen at some point quite soon. Tom?
OK, thank you so much, Mohammed. We really do appreciate you painting the picture there for us and what it is like in southern Israel. Thanks. Well, Israel's military says it's recaptured some areas near the Gaza border. The village of Kfar Aza was among the communities hit hardest when Hamas launched its military operation on Saturday. As Charles Stratford reports from the scene, dozens of bodies have been recovered.
Israel's military says it's back in control of Kfar Aza, one of the many villages near the Gaza border where Palestinian fighters got in. But soldiers are nervous about more infiltrations and Hamas gunmen hiding in the surrounding fields. Heavy machine gun fire close by. And the bodies lying in the trees begin to appear. Palestinian fighters, and then amongst the destruction of their homes, civilians. Soldiers lift the body bags on stretchers to a waiting truck.
There's still grenades, there's still bodies in houses, and slowly we're now clearing these communities. Whoever survived this is already out of here. Still counting the bodies, dozens.
Weapons lie amongst the rubble. A destroyed paraglider on which one of the fighters flew in. The broken security fence, one of dozens of places breached.
What you're looking at there is one of the breach points through which Hamas fighters came into Israel. There's been a lot of destruction here in the village of Kfar Aza. We've seen a lot of bodies, and the military tell us that they are not only Hamas fighters, but foreign workers and many Israeli civilians.
The road to nearby Sderot is littered with destroyed cars and more bodies close by. The smouldering ruins of a cosmetics factory destroyed by one of the thousands of rockets fired from Gaza. And suddenly, the ripping sound of another approaching barrage.
Keep filming, keep filming, keep filming.
We've been in contact with somebody that lived through that nightmare.
We need to kill them. We need to strangle them. Otherwise, it will continue. We can't go back to giving them food, water, building material. Really? We should not give them these things.
The build-up of military equipment near the border continues as Israel vows vengeance for an attack on a scale it has never suffered before. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, Kfar Aza.
OK, let's look at some of the headlines today across Israel. The newspaper Israel Hayom focuses on political leadership, saying the current government is conspicuous by its absence. It highlights former Prime Minister Golda Meir going out to meet soldiers in the 1973 Arab-Israeli war and says the essence of leadership is to be on the ground with the people. A columnist for the Haaretz Daily has taken his criticism one step further. Zvi Barel describes Benjamin Netanyahu as a gang leader and reiterates the paper's calls for the Prime Minister to resign. The Jerusalem Post focuses on warfare. It quotes an officer who says the Israeli army is bombing entire neighbourhoods in Gaza to hit Hamas positions. But he says the campaign is not the same as Hamas targeting civilians on Saturday. For Israel, he maintains, there is always a military target, but we are not being surgical. Well, similar arguments are made in the online publication Walla. It's carrying an interview with the general who says civilians are not targets, but also that no warnings are given when forces are targeting an enemy. Now, a journalist for the online magazine 972 questions a report widely circulated on social media on Tuesday, alleging Hamas fighters beheaded babies in Kfar Aza. In a post on X, Oren Ziv says the Israeli military spokespeople he interviewed at the site could not confirm the reports. And support from the White House is also on the front pages. The Times of Israel interviewed US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, who says America shares Israel's deep fear and anger, now underlining the unconditional relationship between the two countries. Well, Marwan Bashara, Al Jazeera senior political analyst, joins us once again on Skype from Paris. And Marwan, what do you make of some of, I guess, the critical reaction from the Israeli media? What stands out there for you?
Well, clearly at this point in time, there's one or two rather sober media outlets, notably Haaretz, the most professional newspaper in Israel. You could call it the New York Times of Israel. And it has a number of columnists and reporters that tend to be critical of the Netanyahu government and tend to give better, more fair coverage of the occupied Palestinian territories. And I think Tzvi Barel is one of their senior commentators. For a long time, he was editor of the Arab Affairs at the newspaper. And I think he does reflect a certain criticism, a certain critique of Prime Minister Netanyahu that is not widespread for the time being. I only heard Moshe Yalon, a former head of intelligence, who also shared Tzvi Barel's appreciation that Netanyahu is a failed leader, and the last thing he should be is a wartime leader, because certainly this whole debacle happened under his watch. And there's a major accusations built on the idea that even Egypt has warned Israel of the coming attacks. But because Netanyahu refused to let the intelligence chiefs to come into the cabinet meetings and update them on that basically Netanyahu failed not only to stop this from happening, he only should have known about it, at least from the Egyptians, and at least he did nothing about it. The overall sentiments in Israel, as you know, is more or less rallying around the flag, for the time being accepting whatever government there is, as long as they can provide some sense of security and take revenge for the attacks in last weekend. And you would see people rally around the flag, and you would see the likes of Gantz and others joining the government, as long as war continues. But I think sooner or later, Netanyahu will be held accountable for his fiasco, aside being held accountable on all these other corruption charges that he's indicted for.
Now, I want to read you a statement from Hamas, which has just issued this in the last hour or so. It's rejecting allegations that it committed crimes against women and children, saying, and I quote, "Some Western media outlets continue to spread Zionist slander and lies about our Palestinian people and their resistance, which falsely and slanderously promoted allegations that members of the Palestinian resistance beheaded children and assaulted women without any evidence to support their lies and claims." Hamas strongly condemns the baseless allegations. Now, Marwan, what do you make of that? Obviously, the PR and media battle is going to be pretty vital here, and we're already hearing and seeing plenty of misinformation being spread. What, if anything, do you think can be done about that?
Well, you know, we live in a world of web, and the virtual realities nowadays, when it comes to information, is more important than the actual reality. And as soon as some news reports, I think including one from the Los Angeles Times that came out about the beheading of the baby, they've been retracted from the more professional press. But I think they took a life of their own online, and then there is no stop to their mutation and proliferation, especially by those who do intentionally want to spread disinformation, or those in Israel and the United States who are making the case for wider war, beginning with land invasion of Gaza. there is, or seems to be, my reading of the media in general and some of the media pundits who are towing the line of the Israeli line and the Biden administration line, seems to be making this false comparison, equating of Hamas with Al-Qaeda or Hamas with ISIS, talking about 10/7 like it was 9/11, and talking about beheading of babies, and quoting the likes of President Biden when he says the sole reason for Hamas's existence is to kill Jews, and that they have a slick PR like ISIS. All of these rather false statements tend to inflame the souls and bring back that comparison to 9/11 and to the invasion of Iraq. And I think in the most tragic and saddest of ways, I think some of the media pundits and some of the people in the Israeli government and outside it are trying to recreate the atmosphere that was predominant prior to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. I think they're preparing the atmosphere among Israelis, Americans, and others for a more dramatic, more escalation that could also involve the Americans, whether it is in Lebanon or elsewhere, because now, as you know, we have a naval strike force, an American naval strike force in the East Mediterranean. And I think all of that is not only wrong and misinformation and all of that, it's also a tragic repetition of a huge fiasco of the 2003 war against Iraq on false pretense. And here we go again. They're building the case for Iraq, for another war in Palestine, perhaps Lebanon, and against Iran under false pretense.
Marwan, if I could briefly just change tack a little bit. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has just jumped on a plane to head to Israel. What impact do you think his visit will have, and how big a role is the US going to play here in the days and weeks and potentially months ahead?
I was stunned, and I'm not easily stunned, by President Biden's speech yesterday. It seemed to me that he and today Secretary Blinken were repeating word for word the kind of sound bites we hear from Netanyahu. Netanyahu has a very particular style of talking in sound bites and inflaming the souls. And I think President Biden used some of these same, sound bites that basically are disinformation from Prime Minister Netanyahu. I will even go further to say that I have a sense that Prime Minister Netanyahu is manipulating the American president and his Secretary of State into escalating and into deploying a huge and modern new naval strike force in the East Mediterranean. And the idea that he could actually talk them into giving green light to Israel, to the Netanyahu government, this very radical, rather fanatic neo-fascist government, to do whatever it takes, as long as it takes, in Gaza and beyond. That's just a call for war crimes that we've already seen happening in the past 72 hours, but even widening the war towards land invasion and perhaps opening another front in the north against Hezbollah, and perhaps even going beyond that, because the idea of this warning and ultimatum that Biden gave and that Blinken repeated today about, if anyone thinking of taking advantage, don't, right? You could expect any sort of escalation between Hezbollah and Israel to happen, could be initiated by Israel or by Hezbollah, God knows, right, in the coming days. And that could basically draw in the United States into another regional war. Now, just quickly, this is the administration, this is the American president, who only recently assured us that he is the president who's going to end the forever wars in the Middle East, that he pulled out in humiliation out of Afghanistan because he's a man of his word. Now he wants to start another Middle East war after the 2003 fiasco in Iraq. That would be a big mistake.
OK, Marwan, we really do appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. That is Marwan Bashara, Senior Political Analyst for Al Jazeera. The Israeli army is trying to calm fears after a false alarm sent people nationwide scrambling for shelter. Well, Warning sirens rang out across northern Israel and flares were fired at the border as people across the country were told to seek shelter over a possible aerial infiltration from Lebanon. The army now says the panic was caused by human error. Well, Ali Hashim is in the town of Marwahin in south Lebanon, near the border with Israel. And Ali, there have been plenty of moving parts here with alerts and fears that there had been an incursion from Lebanon into northern Israel. Can you just recap for us exactly what happened and where things stand now?
Well, we moved to Naqoura, which is also on the borders. Well, today was a very hectic day. It started with a Hezbollah attack on Israeli troops on the borders, mainly in Jazeera village on the borderline. According to the pictures we saw from Hezbollah, it seems that there was a direct hit with guided missile. Now, following that, the Israelis started shelling the villages surrounding the borders, and there were 2 people injured. Now, later on, this alarm came, and there were these reports about planes, paragliders crossing towards the other side of the border. However, there was no genuine reason to understand why this alarm is coming out, because none of these paragliders were seen with eyes. Also, at the same time, these paragliders, the alleged paragliders, did not engage in a battle or in a fight on the ground. So later on, it was clarified that this is not right. However, the Israeli army continued to launch flares in the skies of South Lebanon, also burning the bushes around the borders in order to deny any fighters a kind of a cover, just in case they're trying to infiltrate the border. So it was a hectic day for the Israeli troops on the Lebanese side, and this clarified the situation, whereas the tension is mounting day after day. So in comparison with yesterday, when rockets were launched and Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades claimed responsibility, or the day before, where a group from Islamic Jihad infiltrated the borders and engaged in a battle with the Israelis, today was a bigger day. And it seems that this tension is going to continue. It's not going to stop. And at least from what I understand, this is going to continue as far as the campaign on Gaza is going to continue.
And Ali, what are the military capabilities of Hezbollah? I mean, I know you've covered many of the conflicts that they've previously been involved in. What sort of firepower could they bring if they were to get fully involved in this?
Well, over the past 13 years, the last time Hezbollah engaged in a war with Israel was in 2006. And then there were only 2,000 fighters, I mean, professional fighters on the border, with maybe tens of thousands of rockets. However, now in 2023, Hezbollah says that they have tens of thousands of fighters. And the number of their rockets isn't known. However, what we know from Israeli claims and even from Hezbollah's statements, that they have precision missiles, long-range missiles relatively. And these missiles are able to hit any spot in Israel. And this is the main issue. The other side of the picture is that Hezbollah's fighters over the past years engaged in battles in different terrains, whereas they were in Syria, they went to Yemen, they went to Iraq. So the experience they accumulated over the past years is big. And that's why also Israel is so concerned. Now, Hezbollah is not the only party now in South Lebanon with the new factor of the Palestinian factions, Al-Qassam brigades and Al-Quds brigades, fighting from Lebanon, as we saw in the past few days.
OK, thanks so much for that, Ali. That is Ali Hashim for us in the south of Lebanon. Well, the first shipment of US military aid has arrived in Israel. This comes after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised to escalate the bombardment of Gaza. President Joe Biden has expressed his full support for Israel. Well, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has left on a diplomatic mission to Israel. He gave a brief statement at Joint Base Andrews before departing.
The United States has Israel's back. We have the back of the Israeli people. We have their back today. We'll have it tomorrow. We will have it every day. We stand resolutely against terrorism. We've seen the almost undescribable acts committed by Hamas against Israeli men, women and children. Every day we're learning more, and it is simply heartbreaking. Not since ISIS have we seen this kind of depravity, and we will continue to stand very resolutely against it. When I'm in Israel, I'll have the opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Herzog, other senior officials. I look forward to seeing our embassy team as well that's been doing terrific work during these difficult days. We're determined to make sure that Israel gets everything it needs to defend itself, to provide for the security of its people. Already, significant military assistance requested by Israel is on the way. That's on top of everything that we've been doing for years, including with the Memorandum of Understanding that was negotiated by President Obama to make sure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself.
OK, Patty Culhane joins me now from Washington, D.C. And we have a better idea now of the military aid the US is sending to Israel. But what is Blinken hoping to achieve by going himself?
Well, by going himself, it's simply a show of support, a show of solidarity. And he also, I think, is going to be having discussions about the next step forward. So his plane is wheels up now, and then he's going to be in Israel for those meetings in the morning. We expect he'll also stop in Jordan. The big question I'm looking for is if they add a stop in Egypt. Now, after covering policy officials here in Washington for quite a while, one thing I look for is when everybody is on the same page with a statement that they repeat verbatim. We've now heard from the president, from the Secretary of State, from the National Security Advisor, the National Security Spokesman, saying that the difference between Hamas and Israel is that Israel follows the laws that govern conflict, armed conflict. And there's been a lot of criticism from some of the administration because they haven't urged Israel to show restraint. But what we're seeing now is them talking about they want a civilian corridor. That's where Egypt comes in. They've all been talking repeatedly over the last 2 days, even more so today, about how they are engaged in high-level talks to make that happen. Because obviously the laws of war say you can't target civilians. Civilians can't get out of Gaza because they are trapped there. So that corridor, I think, is one way they're signaling by using that statement that Israel follows the rules of law. It could apply to that corridor, but also the total blockade of Gaza. That is a war crime that goes against all of the Geneva Convention, the laws of war. So it could be a subtle hint to Israel that they're going to want to see some moves in that direction.
And Patty, Blinken also talked about trying to get safe passage opened up for civilians in Gaza to somehow get out. What did he say about that?
He said that these are long, difficult, complicated discussions, and that he was asked if the Israelis holding it up, and he said, I'm not going to get into that. But it's very clear that that is now a priority of the administration. When it comes to the idea of munitions, it's a concern here in D.C. because, remember, the U.S. has been supplying massive amounts of artillery and ammunition to Ukraine. And there have been questions even before this happened in Israel as to whether they were going to be able to keep up the supplies. I've been speaking with the Pentagon in my role as defense correspondent, and officials there still say off camera that they are confident that they can meet both needs. They talk about having global stockpiles all over the world, but they've been really vague about what Israel's going to ask for. The only thing they've been specifically saying is munitions that go into the Iron Dome air defense system. But if there is an incursion by Israeli forces into Gaza, I can tell you that street-to-street fighting in densely populated areas is very much a disadvantage to Israeli forces. So if they are going to be talking about that, you'll likely see requests for things like better body armor, night vision, small arms ammunition. So being very vague about it, but we'll try and find out some more.
OK, thank you so much, Patty. That is Patty Culhane for us in Washington, D.C. At the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, the permanent observer of Palestine to the UN, called on the international community to help the Palestinian people.
There has to be a humanitarian intervention in order to avoid a looming catastrophe and humanitarian massive crisis in the Gaza Strip. We will continue with these efforts with everyone. I understand that the Arab emergency ministerial meeting just concluded a few minutes ago in Cairo. We will study what the outcome and see how we can fit all these things with our activities and our contacts with all concerned parties here at the United Nations. We hope very soon that the international community, led by the SG, led by the Security Council, will rise up to their responsibilities and begin with the process of sending humanitarian help and assistance to the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip.
Well, Shihab Ratanzi is live for us at the United Nations. And as we heard, the Palestinian ambassador to the UN calling for humanitarian intervention. I mean, how likely is that to happen at this point in time?
Well, at the very least, we do have some breaking news for you about the responsibilities of the UN Security Council that the Palestinian ambassador there just mentioned. In the last few minutes, we just heard from a source that Brazil, who is currently has the presidency of the Security Council, has circulated a memo to the other members of the Security Council saying there will be a Security Council meeting on the current conflict on Friday at 3 p.m. local, 1900 GMT. We don't know what the format of that meeting will be. We don't know whether it will be open or closed. We don't know who will be allowed to attend or who will be briefing it. But the Security Council will have another meeting on this conflict on Friday, following their closed consultations that we saw on Sunday. Beyond that, as far as the United Nations and its responsibilities are concerned, we do have some movement from the Secretary General of the UN, who, for the first time, called for water and food to be allowed into Gaza now. And that's movement from his statement on Monday, when all he would say was he was distressed by news of the renewed siege on Gaza with electricity and food, which was, some consternation as a result, because clearly this is completely in violation of the Geneva Conventions, proportionality, and so on. So now at least the Secretary General is calling for food and water to be allowed into Gaza now. So movement there, and also movement from the Security Council. A meeting will be held on Friday at 1900 GMT.
OK, thank you so much for that update. We really do appreciate it. That is Shihab Ratanzi for us at the United Nations. Well, Mahjoub Zaweri joins us in our studio in Doha. Thank you very much for being with us once again. Now, we heard a little bit about the diplomatic efforts from Palestinians. Yes. Do you believe that they're going to be listened to by the international community, or are they going to fall on deaf ears, do you think?
There is no doubt the diplomatic effort started in the last 24 hours. There is a lot of criticism from the Europeans. Even for the first time, we start hearing from Washington that talking about international law, talking about behaving as a state, respecting international law. These are new terminologies in the last few days. I think there is, from what they are watching on what happened in Gaza, the level of the damage and destroying happened, and the casualties and all of this is pushing the international community to do something. And that's the reason I think Blinken in the region is not only just to please Israelis, it's also to pressure Israelis, because he knows and his administration knows that Netanyahu government did not listen to their advice to avoid such an incident. So basically, I think there is a dramatic effort will continue to at least to open a gate for humanitarian aid to get to Gaza.
Mahjoub Zaweri, thank you once again for explaining the situation. Thanks so much. Well, Israeli settlers have killed at least 4 Palestinians in attacks on a village south of Nablus in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry says Israeli forces have also killed a 16-year-old boy near Hebron. 29 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since the war began on Saturday. Well, hundreds of Palestinian workers from Gaza are stranded after they were dismissed from their jobs in Israel. They were left at checkpoints near the occupied West Bank on Saturday and are unable to return to their homes. Imran Khan reports from Ramallah.
Cut off from their homes, this has become a makeshift home for some Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. It was a local government building designed for sports and arts. It's now a camp for displaced people. There isn't a person here whose family hasn't been touched by this war.
My brothers and cousins called me and told me my son was injured. A few hours later they called again and told me he was killed. I want to go see him. His mother is in Egypt for medical treatment. She's stuck there and I'm stuck here. He will be buried and I won't see him. My other two children are sheltering in schools alone.
Others tell us they have lost multiple members of their families. Most don't know if they'll have a home to return to. These men were employed under an agreement Israel made with the Gaza Labour Ministry, which allowed a set number of people to work in Israel. It was a good deal for Israel. Businesses got cheap labour and could circumvent labour laws. The Israeli government could say it was doing something to help Gaza. But on Saturday, employers acting on Israeli police instructions were told to take them to checkpoints at the occupied West Bank. Before that happened, we are told some were interrogated and assaulted by the Israeli security services, a claim we cannot confirm. The influx has taken the Palestinian authorities by surprise, and they're woefully unprepared.
We need to maintain the health factor very importantly in this location. We are talking about, as we speak, 550. This number might just rise to 700 or maybe 1,000 because people are keeping pouring. Once they are discovered inside Israel, handed over to the Israeli military, and they are just simply left after being beaten and humiliated on the checkpoints to find their way to these shelters.
Everyone here is watching the news on their mobile phones, but unlike you or I, they're not watching for the news. They're watching their homes being destroyed in real time. They can't get home and there's nothing they can do about it. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera, Ramallah.
Majub is back with us in the studio. Just watching that story, what do you make of that? How big an issue is that going to be in the weeks and months ahead? People not being able to earn a living.
It is a big issue because basically we know that thousands of Gazan people, they are working inside Israel and they have sort of permissions to work in Gaza and inside Israel. And those people now, they are humiliated by the Israeli side. But more importantly, the Israeli economy is losing them as well. So it is. Both sides are losing, actually. Of course, the humanitarian side in Gaza is pushing those people to feel more sad, more disconnected with their families, and they pay a heavy price. They lost their job, and they lost their families as well. That is a very sad story, and this is one of the ramifications of this conflict.
Yeah. We just want to go back a little bit. Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the United States, is flying to Israel as we speak. Yes. He mentioned before he took off that talks are underway but haven't fully developed at this stage into trying to open up a safe passage for civilians within Gaza to somehow get out. How vital, how important is that, and what would be some of the blocks to that actually happening, do you think?
You know, we know that the only gate now is open is with Egypt. So basically the only opportunity is to work and coordinate with Egypt so they can get some humanitarian aid to Gaza. Or actually there are thousands of sick people. They have to go also for medication. So I think the debate has started already is how to open that, I would say, communications and allow some food and water to get to Gaza. And the issue is, how can you sustain this? It's about sustainability. It's not only just getting it one time. You need to keep it running, especially we know that at least in the last 3 days, the water is cut, the electricity is cut, so the suffering is increasing rapidly, basically.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better any time soon. It's only going to continue getting worse. Thanks so much, Majid Zaweri. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we've been keeping across the extensive damage caused by Israel's rocket attacks on Gaza over the past few days. Israel began their strikes on Saturday following the start of an operation carried out by Hamas. The images before the attacks are of different locations within Gaza in May this year. Now, Gaza's Old City is one of the areas which endured heavy damage from these attacks. Now, these are images of damage to the Susi Mosque inside the Shati refugee camp close to the coastline. Well, Palestinian photographer Motaz Aziza gives us a glimpse of the sheer devastation in some of the most iconic neighbourhoods of Gaza.
I'm here today to show you the massive destruction that happened to the most beautiful areas in the Strip, in Gaza City. as you can see, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. I don't know what should I say. But believe me, it's the most sadness that Gaza ever had. Oh my God, oh my God. It's like a whole square. More than 15 to 20 houses got demolished. Not destroyed, demolished.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit, Mahjoub, about what you think is going to happen now that the power has been cut off. How quickly are things going to deteriorate in Gaza?
Imagine hospitals, how they will function. You know, you can't imagine. There are a lot of medicine they need to be put in a fridge. That's the basic things. You have a lot of people are dying, and you need to make sure that the places to keep them are basically fine. So there are a lot of limitation, a lot of pressure is happening now. You need to make sure that there is enough food for those who are in hospital. The number of casualties more than around 5,000. And those are staying in hospitals. They need to be fed, they need water, they need medicines. So the issue is deteriorated quickly actually, and the more electricity will be cut, the problem will be actually adding more to the people suffering, and I would say that we will have more impact on people's life as well.
In terms of getting humanitarian aid in, who bears responsibility for trying to get that in? Does that fall on the UN?
UN is involved. They are support, because if they coordinate with Egypt, governments will work with Egypt, and there is a talk about Al Arish airport, which is close to Gaza, and basically they will send all the humanitarian aid there and then get it from Egypt to Gaza. So United Nations is involved, Egyptian government is involved. I'm sure there are other governments, they will be involved in getting all of this humanitarian aid. But the issue is, they need to do this quickly, because the suffering of the people is increasing rapidly because of all of these attacks on civilians and buildings where there is no military target.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time.